Hi, I'm Joe Levy from Air One Equipment. What we're going to do today is go over the Paratech MultiForce airbag system. The reason we want to do that is it's a little bit different than most systems that you're going to use. Even though it looks like two separate airbags, it's one single bag. So it's a single bag with a relief valve inside. So that's kind of important because these bags don't stack. It's contained within the single bag. The capacity of this bag is 31 tons at 1 inch. It'll lift high. At full height, you're going to be able to lift about 5 tons. So the capacity goes down as the bag height increases. There's some different components to this kit. But before I do that, I just want to stop and make sure you're aware of this. I'm not wearing full PPE. You should be wearing your full PPE. When we work on this vehicle, we're not stabilizing. We're just going to show the lift. But if we were doing a lift, we need to either crib or use struts to support it as we go up, especially if we're going to put somebody underneath that vehicle. The component system. This is how the system looks. Okay, the bag is stowed right on the top of the MultiForce. I have all my controls contained inside the saddlebag, and my hoses are on the outside. So this is the proper way it's stored. If I push in this gold button here, I can rotate the handle up. I can do this, pushing here to extend the handle out. It locks into different detent positions. The important thing about that is when I roll this around, I have to find the sweet spot. So for everybody who's different height, it's going to be different for everybody. So idea is I can roll this into position, turn around, and set it down before I put it into operation. The components. Inside the bag, 2 clips, bag comes off, 2 zipper compartments. If I lift my handle, the gold release lifts the handle, disconnects it. I can take the bag off. All of my controls, like I said, are inside the bag. I have a regulator. The regulator is preset, 215 psi. The bag operates at 150. 215 allows us to force air through there quickly so we can get this thing up in a pretty quick manner. O-ring is attached on the cylinder connection. I have an on-off valve here. Keep it on all the time. There's really no reason to turn the regulator off. Just a protective nipple, store that away in the bag. So this is my regulator. In the other side of the pouch, I have a controller. The controller allows you to use 2 bags at the same time. So not only could you use this MultiForce, but if you had to get a space underneath here, you could use a regular flat bag. The idea behind that is I need 5.5 inches to get this bag into position. I'd only need 7/8 of an inch to get a normal bag in. So sometimes I may have to use a regular airbag. So that's why I have a dual deadman controller. With this controller, air inlet, okay, 2 outlets. I have a push button. You won't see that from here, but there's an LED light, lights up in the middle of the night, so you can see the gauges real well. I'm going to turn that off, up, down. That's as complicated as it gets. I also have in my bag an inline relief. So the inline relief valve is designed so that I can disconnect this bag and leave it sit. If I had to do a lift and then I had to use my control somewhere else, you have 2 bags in your system, I could just simply disconnect this, shut it off, and I can control that. This always goes in this position. We never attach this on the bag. It would fit there, but we don't want to do that because we don't want to reach underneath whatever we're trying to control. Okay? So that always goes in this position. When I make my connections, I'm going to go back over here to your cylinder. Okay, the block with your cylinder. okay? Quick connect cylinder has to go down into the block. I have to make sure that there's no orange showing on here. If I have orange showing, it's not connected all the way, so I want to make sure that I don't see any orange. So now I know my cylinder is seated in there properly. We always advise using the black hose off the regulator. That way everyone who connects it does it the same way. The Paratech connectors. It's a locking connector, but it has a safety built in. So when I make this connection, I simply push and I spin the collar up to lock it in place. If I don't spin the collar and lock it in place, it's going to weep air, and that just tells me my connection is not secure. So when I make this connection, first one is going to be on the cylinder, preset regulator, regulator is in the open position. If I had too much pressure coming in the regulator, there's a relief valve built into the regulator, so it's safe. I make my first hose connection, and I have to make sure then that I lock the collar down in position. From here, I'm going to go out to my controller. Controller plugs in the back side, again, locking the collar. At this point, I can turn the cylinder on. So when I turn this on, it's going to pressurize from the regulator all the way up to the controller. If I don't lock the collar, you're going to hear this. That just tells you to make sure that you lock that collar into position. Okay. From here, we connect our yellow hose. This hose goes on the airbag itself. And again, locking the collar down. This goes out to the controller. The inline relief valve, this is the open position, just like a gas valve. So that's open for this. At this point, we're ready to inflate. So I'm going to do an inflation here just so you can see what happens when I inflate. Up on green, okay. Leaking because I didn't lock the coupling down. I was testing you. The bag is a two-stage bag. So there's two compartments to this bag, for lack of a better term. Okay? Single bag, two compartments. There's a pressure relief inside the bag. When I get about 10 or 15 psi, the valve's going to open. So with nothing on top of the valve, it's going to wait till it's fully inflated. If I have this underneath something with some weight, once I get some weight on here, the other bag's going to inflate. So the beauty of this bag is the quick operation. I can get 26 inches in a matter of seconds. The nice thing with the bag itself, this down here, the top plate is aluminum, okay? It's buried under the neoprene rubber, but there's an aluminum plate on top. What that does, your regular airbags, they become a cylinder when you inflate them. So you get less and less surface contact. With this, I always maintain this amount of surface area. So that helps me to stay connected against what I'm lifting. On the bottom side, I also have an aluminum pad on the bottom, okay? This is designed to spread the weight of the bag out, but this is actually the bottom of the bag. So it actually comes through the base. These are for kind of a non-skid surface for putting underneath the whatever we're trying to lift. These handles can be used for tie downs, whatever you need to use the handles for, or for lifting. The bag itself is made of neoprene rubber over aramid fibers. So the aramid fibers give the bag its strength. The neoprene rubber protects it from any chemicals that you're going to come in contact with. Really similar construction to your standard airbags, but just in a different configuration. There's pressure relief built into the bag itself. So if I come across something that I shouldn't be lifting, it's too heavy for my lift, instead of the bag failing, it'll relieve pressure. I have a pressure relief built into my controller. In the controller, it's set at 150. So if I bring this up underneath some weight, the gauge is going to climb. At 150 psi, it'll relieve pressure through the back side of the controller. This also has a pressure relief set at 165. So if for some reason this fails, this will relieve pressure at 165. So there's a redundant safety built into the system. Down on the bag, simple push button, okay? Without a lot of weight pushing down, this bag's gonna take a little while to deflate. So if I can, in a safe position, don't do this under load, okay? I can simply come by and disconnect my bag. It's gonna come out a little quicker. And again, not under load, okay? You make sure you're sitting down on something flat. Gonna stop it there. The design of the MultiForce bag is to be quick. So it's really designed, this is a remote placement bag. So all I'm gonna do, when I get close to being in position, okay, I'm gonna lift these two gold tabs. It's gonna make a loud noise, but then I'm gonna take my handle and I'm gonna push it exactly under what I'm trying to lift. If I want, I can remove the handle, so the handle will come off if I want to remove it, or I can leave the handle in position. We're going to go ahead and make our bag connection. Again, we have that locking coupling, so once I connect that, good. We're going to come back to the controller. Putting our inline relief on the side we're going to use, making sure we lock that collar down. So my yellow hose is connected. Now I'm going to take my supply hose from my regulator and I'm going to bring it in the back end of my dual controller. Once I turn my cylinder on, it's going to tell me if I locked all those collars. One thing to keep in mind, if it's the middle of the night and you're not getting any air to the regulator, make sure that somebody didn't turn off the regulator. It's always going to be in line. So every once in a while something happens, somebody turns that, but there's no real need to turn that off, okay? We're now in position and we're going to simply go up on yellow.
Up on yellow.
Now, once I make contact, I'm going to hold you there just for a minute, because what you'll see now is I have contact, so I have pressure coming down in that bag, so my top bag is now going to inflate. So we're going to continue to go up on yellow.
Up on yellow.
I'm going to have you hold there. Again, safety thing, we have to use cribbing, we have to use struts, we have to make sure we stabilize this vehicle as we lift. Don't do this in a real rescue, okay? The difference between low pressure bags and high pressure bags, which these are, is low pressure bags are not stable till they're fully inflated all the way up. With this bag, it's going to maintain stability throughout the lift. The other thing it'll do is if we get off center or on an angle, okay, the bag will compensate for that. So we're going to keep going up on the yellow. Okay. Take a look at your gauge now. So we're going to take a look at the gauge. The bag is almost fully inflated, but the gauge is only showing how many PSI? About 40 PSI, because we're not lifting a 30-ton object, we're only lifting a 2-ton object. So your pressure isn't always going to go up to the top. And if you're testing your bags in the station, you're not going to achieve full pressure. So you're just going to inflate them to full height, checking for leaks, that kind of thing. But this is, okay, a pretty nice lift for what we got. If we had somebody pinned under a portion of this vehicle and we had a lift from the back, we might be good. The one thing we don't talk about is if I had to get under something that's on the ground, okay, you might have to use your standard high pressure bag to get that gap. You need 5.5 inches to get that into position. I can also use this vertically. So I did a horizontal lift, I got it straight up, okay? But I could do a vertical lift. If I'm up on the bridge and there's a car up against the wall and I want the driver's pinned in there and I want to extricate, I can simply take this bag, and I'll show you in a minute. We can drop it in vertically and push to get the car away from the wall. If you're on 355, same thing on the Jersey barrier. You can get more than 2 feet, and that way you can extricate by popping the door like you normally would instead of tunneling or taking the roof off. It's going to make it a little bit easier for you to do your extrication. If we came down on this, it's going to simply be down on yellow.
Down on yellow.
And again, stable throughout the lift. Even as this is coming down, the bag stays stable. Hey, if you stop right there for a second. Okay. Now, we always like to show if something happened to my hose, okay? Somebody accidentally cut the hose. Something happens to the hose. It's only 150 PSI in the hose. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you take control of this, okay? And I'm going to have you open up this connection. Pop it off. Okay. Simply by crimping the hose, okay, you can maintain that. Okay. It's only 150 PSI. But if something happened to your hose, grab it, okay? Crimp it off, duct tape it. We've seen people cut the hose during an extrication. Thumb, okay? If I had to let air out of this now, okay, I can do it like that. If I accidentally popped off the connection, okay, and we're going to put it back in place, put it back in, okay, lock it up. Okay, back in service. The hoses are field replaceable, okay? So I have 2 nuts here, okay? One's a ferrule, okay, that goes down inside the hose, and then this is a collet that spins on the outside of the hose. If I took and wrenches opposite direction, I could spin this out. So if something happens to your hose and you get a hole in the end of it, cut it off straight, and you can recrimp that hose without having to buy a new hose. All of the fittings are brass. We do that because we don't want the fittings to spark. We want to make them non-sparking fitting. They're all made of brass, so they're a little bit soft. So occasionally you might get a dinged up coupling. Not a problem. You're just going to simply file it off if you can. If not, you just replace those couplings. Okay? So fairly simple and easy to maintain. Okay. When you use the bag in a vertical position, this could be against the Jersey barrier on 355. It could be against the concrete wall of the bridge. It could be anywhere you need to create room. So what we can do is we simply put the bag against the stationary object. Bag hits the rim on the tire. Okay? You do it on the front, you do it on the back, but then we're going to push out. So if we go up on the bag, we're going to get a good push out. Okay. This simulation kind of shows you what we're doing here. But you can get, if you look at this, you can get 2 feet. Then you can go at that with your regular spreader, pop the door like you normally do.